My name is Bernadette Kiely. I'm an artist. I live here in Thomastown, County Kilkenny, and this is my sort of studio gallery. I've been invited by the Drawing Box to talk about the work that I've made during the current lockdown. It so happens that this work is part of a new exhibition that was launched on Thursday, and it's called One Touch of Nature Makes the Whole World Kin. And it includes all the work that you see here. Some of the work I have made already, but this particular work behind me is the work that I made during this actual particular time from March until now. In previous work I wouldn't have focused really on, say, close-up details of buildings. My work is more related to what's happening in the landscape. So these evolved out of something that I would do naturally, which is walk. And I tend to go for a walk every morning, and during the lockdown in particular I went walking every night as well. So while I was out walking, obviously it became very apparent very quickly that there was no one else around, because it was usually around 10:30, 11, even 12 some nights. And it became very clear that I was the only person walking around the town, apart from a couple of cats. So a friend asked me one evening to send photographs of the town bereft of people, so I did. And after a while I thought about maybe making paintings in relation to it, but I sort of left it there for a while. But anyway, as I was going around each evening, I began to look at the windows of the buildings, because there was lights coming from some of them, not all of them. And each night I began to look closer at the windows, and it became sort of apparent to me that I could sort of see, well, there's people there, there's people inside, or there's not anybody inside, or it's too late and maybe they've turned off the lights. So in a way I began to kind of think about the people who were inside and whether they were experiencing, say, the isolation of the virus. And I thought, well, they might be, or they must be, seeing as there was no one out at all. And as each night I went out, I began taking more and more photographs. And because there was no one around, I was actually able to stand out in the middle of the street, right in the middle of the road, no cars or anything. So it actually became, in a, I suppose, paradoxical kind of way, a great freedom, that I was actually able to stand out in the middle of the road, take photographs from a distance, and have a really good look at the buildings and the windows without anybody else around. And normally I wouldn't do that because, well, you just couldn't. There'd be traffic or there'd be people around. So after a while I decided I would make paintings about the windows predominantly, or in a way my experience of what I looked at while I was walking around the town every night. I'm still doing it. So I'll just talk a little bit about a couple of them. This one in particular was and is a house where not all the time the light was on, and I stood outside and looked at it and gradually realised I think it's the television, because it flickered a little. And then I really wasn't sure, and some nights it was on, some nights it was off. The other ones were buildings. In fact, this one in particular was a building that I didn't think anybody lived there. And then the light came on, so I realised, well, there's somebody there now. This is not of a window, but as I was walking along through the street, I started to, well, I have looked at shadow a lot, so I'm almost always aware of shadow, and I tend to be drawn very much to shadow. But the shadow of this metal tree surround was very stark one night, so I took a number of photographs of it. And I really liked it because it was made by a friend of mine who used to live in Thomastown. She's a great artist, and she doesn't live here any longer. So I decided to make a painting about that. And the one beside it here with the pink windows, the light was shining on it, street lights, all street lights shining on it in such a way that made the walls look a little greener, and it stood out. And there's nobody there now, but when I looked at it, it very much reminded me of a man who used to live there, who has since died, a great guy, and he loved music, and the title of it is I Heard a Music Suite Today, and in memory of him, because it evoked a whole world that a lot of people who lived here were part of, and it was great and full of music and life and laughter. So the more I thought about that, the more I thought about time passing, and for example, this painting here and the building now that I made the painting of is extremely dilapidated, and I didn't actually know there was anybody living there either. I would have thought there wouldn't be. So then I began to think about the past of this building and how there used to be a cafe there, and again it was full of life and laughter. So it became, for me personally, while I was walking around each night, about the past and things that we did experience and have now lost. And I suppose that kind of thinking and my feeling about it fed into the paintings. I'm just going to talk a little bit about these drawings. I made a series of very large drawings maybe 6 or 7 years ago or 5 years ago that were exhibited in various exhibitions. So I've chosen these two particular ones here because they evoke similar thinking to the paintings that I was just speaking about. And they're both about the passage of time and, in fact, decay and death. So this one here on the left is basically a charcoal drawing with chalk and water and a little bit of chalk pastel, and it's based on a tree in what used to be called the county home, which is where I go walking in the mornings. The image is of a very old tree that has become totally wrapped up with ivy. The ivy has taken it over and I suppose swallowed it really, so effectively the tree is dying. It's not really that its poignancy attracted me, I suppose. When you're thinking about making a drawing, you're thinking more in terms of formal ideas in shape, line and that kind of thing. But so that was, I suppose, what prompted me to make it also so stark against the background. And the other drawing beside it is, I suppose you could say it's shadow, where it looks, it's light but it's shadow. So it's light and shadow falling on the ground. And it's called The Ground Over Where They Lie. And really it's from a very small patch of ground in the graveyard where my parents are buried. And I suppose because it's not obvious that what it is, some people who have seen it have thought that maybe it was clouds, but it's basically an attempt at drawing flickering light on a very plain, muddy type of flattish ground. And again, it's made with charcoal, chalk, ordinary school chalk really, a little bit of pastel, or actually I don't know if maybe I'll put some acrylic at the bottom, and Probably at some stage they were flat on the ground. I tend to put them on the ground if I need to maybe pour a little bit of water on them to disperse the charcoal, which is something I tend to do. But in general I would have made these standing. Thank you to the Drawing Box for inviting me to talk about my work. Goodbye from Thomastown.